Chapter 22. Huh? Corky took a step back, her expression one of suspicion and disbelief. It isn't mine anymore, Kimmy said, her eyes on the pendant. But, I gave it to Jennifer, Kimmy said. She's telling the truth, Deborah said quickly. Holding her notebook, she climbed to her feet and stepped up beside Kimmy, as if taking sides. Ronnie had moved back to the window and was leaning against the ledge, a troubled look on her face. Jennifer? Corky asked weakly, suddenly feeling as if she were falling down a dark, endless hole. I gave it to Jennifer about a month ago, Kimmy said, resting her hands on her hips. She was always telling me how much she liked it, so one day I saw her in the hall before school, and I just gave it to her. No, Corky insisted, you always wore it. She's telling you the truth, Deborah insisted. I was there when Kimmy gave it to Jennifer. Jennifer was really happy. I was tired of it anyway, Kimmy said with a shrug. The clasp was loose. It was always falling off. Corky stared hard into Kimmy's eyes. She was telling you the truth, Corky realized. But that meant, You hated my sister, Corky declared, unwilling to let Kimmy off the hook. Kimmy shook her head. She turned her eyes to the window. I didn't like her very much, Corky, but I didn't hate her. I guess I resented her a lot. I guess I was a little jealous of her. A little? Corky cried. Okay, a lot, Kimmy admitted, but I'm not a murderer. I wouldn't kill someone because of cheerleading. Jennifer? Corky stammered. Jennifer isn't a killer either, Kimmy said softly. She shook her head. You know that, Corky. Poor Jennifer. But the pendant, Corky said, staring down at it in her hand. Jennifer must have dropped it, Kimmy replied, just like I always did. I told you, the clasp was loose. Corky's mind whirred crazily from thought to thought. She stared at the pendant as if hypnotized by it. The room started to tilt, then spin. Once again she felt as if she were falling down a bottomless dark pit. Corky! Kimmy grabbed her arm. Jennifer couldn't change her clothes in the locker room, Corky said, closing her eyes, trying to make the room stop spinning, trying to make the falling sensation stop. Jennifer always changed at home. She wouldn't go in the locker room. Yeah, maybe, Kimmy agreed. But Corky, why would Jennifer go in the locker room? Why? What was she doing there? Corky screamed. Corky, stop. You're not thinking clearly, Kimmy cried. Sit down, Ronnie said from across the room. Somebody make her sit down. Maybe we should call her parents, Deborah said at the same time. No, Corky screamed, pulling out of Kimmy's grasp. No, I have to talk to Jennifer. I have to know the truth. Corky, please, let us call your parents, Kimmy pleaded. But Corky had already run out of the den and was making her way down the front hallway. The three girls called to her, begging her to come back. What on earth is going on? Kimmy's mom cried, poking her head out of the living room. Corky flew past her and out into the dark, cool night. Corky, come back and talk. She ignored their pleas, their frantic, high-pitched shouts. The car started quickly. The lights shot on, and she headed the car toward Jennifer's house in North Hills, past houses darkened for the night, past empty yards and woods filled with silent, bending trees, past Shadyside High, dark except for the spotlight out front, throwing a shimmering cone of light onto the front doors. Jennifer's house was on a side street just north of the school. As Corky turned the corner, her headlights swept over the low ranch-style house. She braked hard, slowing the car down the street from the house, and stared across the smooth lawn. Dark. All the windows were dark, the shades drawn, curtains pulled. Corky glanced at the dashboard clock. 11 o'clock. Guess they all go to bed early, she said out loud. And then she saw the headlights of a car parked at the curb in front of Jennifer's house flash on. It was a red Skylark, Corky saw. The car pulled slowly away from the curb and edged into the driveway to turn around. The interior lights came on for a second, and the girl in the car was illuminated. It's Jennifer, Corky saw, her mouth dropping open. I didn't know she could drive. I didn't think she could move her legs enough to push the pedals. She watched her pull the car halfway up the drive, then back up into the street, then pull off in the other direction. Jennifer's headlights filled Corky's car with blinding white light. She's coming right at me, Corky thought. She'll see me. Corky ducked her head, covered her face with the sleeve of her coat. Jennifer didn't seem to notice her. The Skylark rolled slowly past, then turned right, heading toward the school. Where could Jennifer be going by herself at 11 o'clock at night, Corky wondered. Deciding to follow her, She eased the car into Jennifer's driveway and turned around just as Jennifer had done. Then she floored the gas pedal and shot around the corner, eager to catch up. Racing down Park Drive, Corky quickly saw that their cars were the only two on the road. She slowed down, deciding to keep at least a block between her car and Jennifer's. Where is she going? Where? The question repeated and repeated in her mind. The full moon floated at the top of the windshield as if leading the way. A raccoon scooted into the road, hesitated in Corky's headlights, then just made it safely to the other side as Corky rolled by. As she followed a block behind the red Skylark, Corky's thoughts went back to her emotional encounter with Kimmy. Kimmy appeared to be telling the truth about the silver pendant, and she truly seems to be concerned about Corky. What did that mean? Was Jennifer in a locker room the afternoon Bobby was killed? Bobby and Jennifer had become best friends. There was no reason to suspect that Jennifer might have killed Bobby. No reason at all. So what was she doing there that afternoon? And what was she doing now? Corky followed the Skylark as it turned onto Old Mill Road. As an oncoming car shot its headlights forward, Corky could see Jennifer's shadow reflected on the back window of the little car. She's heading for Fear Street, Corky realized. But why? Is she going to my house? An unexpected visit? No, Jennifer isn't my friend. She was Bobby's friend. Bobby's friend. Bobby's friend. Bobby's friend. The words repeated until they didn't make any sense. Nothing made any sense. She followed Jennifer's car as it turned onto Fear Street, past the sprawling, ramshackle old houses, past the burnt-out ruins of the old Simon Fear mansion high on its sloping, weed-covered lawn. And then suddenly, after Fear Street curved into the thick woods, Corky saw Jennifer pull her car to the side of the road. Her headlights dimmed, then went out. Corky hit the brakes, her car sliding to a stop less than a block behind. Quickly, she cut her lights. Corky wondered, why is she stopping here? Leaning forward to get a better view through the windshield, she saw where Jennifer had stopped. The cemetery. The Fear Street Cemetery. Squinting through the darkness, she saw Jennifer's car door swing open. Saw Jennifer's hand on the door handle, pushing the door open, holding it open. Then she saw Jennifer turn and put her feet down on the pavement. Oh, I don't believe it, Corky muttered to herself, as Jennifer pulled herself to her feet, stood up, stepped away from the car, slammed the door, walked onto the grass of the cemetery. Walked. I don't believe it, Corky repeated, gaping at the slender, dark figure disappearing behind the gravestones. She walks. She can walk. Bobby was right. That night in front of Jennifer's house, Bobby was right, and I thought she was crazy. Corky leapt out of the car, closing the door silently behind her. Then she began jogging along the curb, running as quietly as she could, staying in the shadows thrown by the tall trees. She stopped and knelt behind a gnarled old oak, and peered where Jennifer had gone. Wisps of fog floated over the graveyard. The moonlight filtering through the fog tinged everything with a pale, sickly green. Shadows shifted and shimmered in the eerie green light. The jagged tombstones glowed. As Corky leaned against a cold, damp tree trunk, peering intently into the dimly lit scene, Jennifer re-emerged, dancing a strange, silent dance. Her arms over her head, her legs, those legs that everyone believed to be paralyzed, twirled and kicked, a silent, cheerless tango. She was wearing her cheerleader costume. The short skirt flew up as she spun. Her dark hair flew behind her as if alive. And what was that she was waving in her hand? Corky squinted into the misty green light. It was the pennant, the shady-side pennant they had made for her after the accident, the crippling accident. And now here was Jennifer, twirling wildly in the green moonlight, kicking and twirling, waving the pennant high, dancing in a narrow circle, bending her back, raising her face to the moon, her long hair flowing down nearly to the ground, round and round. Around a tombstone, Corky realized. Jennifer was circling a tall tombstone, surrounded by 4 other stones. Sarah Fear's tombstone. Waving the pennant, she kicked her legs high as if leading a silent parade. Then, once again, she arched her back, raising her face to the moon. Her eyes closed. The pale green light played off her face. She bowed deeply, crossing her legs as she dipped, a strange curtsy to the moon. And then she rose up and began moving slowly to an unheard rhythm, twirling around the gravestone, her eyes closed, a strange, tranquil smile on her face. Corky couldn't stand it any longer. Pushing herself away from the tree, she lurched forward into the graveyard, her boots sinking into the wet mud. "Jennifer," she called, her voice sounding tiny and hollow on the wind. "Jennifer, what's going on?" Chapter 23. Jennifer halted her strange dance and opened her eyes. Her smile faded. She lowered the pennant to her side. Corky ran, stopping before the first row of gravestones. "Jennifer, what are you doing?" Jennifer's eyes reflected the green moonlight as she turned to face Corky. "I'm not Jennifer," she said, her voice husky, almost breathless. "Huh? Jennifer, I saw you dancing," Corky cried. "I'm not Jennifer," she repeated darkly, standing directly in front of Seraphir's tombstone. And then she screamed, "I'm not Jennifer." "Jennifer, I saw you," Corky insisted. As if in reply, Jennifer lifted one hand high above her head and waved it as if summoning someone. "Oh!" Corky cried out, raising her hands to her face as the grass flew off Seraphir's grave, and the dirt began to rise. Jennifer waved her hand high above her head, and the dirt rose up like a dark curtain, flying off the grave, flying high into the black sky. And then the dirt was swirling around them both, thicker and thicker, until Corky couldn't see beyond it, until Corky was forced to move closer to Jennifer. Faster and faster the curtain of dirt swirled, until it became a raging, dark whirlwind, like a tornado funnel. Covering her eyes with her arm, Corky staggered forward until she was standing face to face with Jennifer. Jennifer held her hand high, as if directing the swirling dirt, her eyes aglow with excitement, the excitement of her power. "Jennifer, what are you doing? Stop it! Stop it, please!" Corky's frightened plea was drowned out by the roar of the spinning dirt. The roar drowned out all sound, all thoughts. She could no longer see the moon or the sky, the graves, the trees. Inside the dark funnel of dirt, she could see only Jennifer. Jennifer, her eyes glowing with an eerie green light, glaring at Corky, her expression hard, angry, her hands still raised high over her head. They were alone, the two of them, trapped inside this frightening storm of graveyard dirt. And then the roar faded and died as the dirt continued to whirl around them, and Jennifer's throaty voice, a voice Corky had never heard before, rose in the fresh silence. "I am not Jennifer," she repeated, glaring coldly at Corky. "Jennifer is dead. Jennifer died weeks ago." "What are you saying?" Corky cried, wrapping her arms around herself as if for protection. "What is happening?" "Jennifer died in a bus accident," the husky voice revealed, her eyes lighting up, as if the words were giving her pleasure. "She was dead that night in the rain. She died on top of Seraphir's grave." "Jennifer, what are you saying?" Corky cried. Her eyes darted around, searching for an escape route, but the swirling black column of dirt offered no hope of escape. "I waited so long, the husky voice said, deepening with sudden sadness. "I waited so long, and then Jennifer came along." "I don't understand," Corky started. "I don't—" "Buried for so long," the voice continued. "Buried down there for 100 years, with Seraphir, waiting. You're Seraphir?" Corky stammered, staring into the angry, glowing eyes. "Not any more," came the reply. Corky shuddered and hugged herself tightly. This isn't happening. The heavy funnel of dirt from the grave continued to swirl silently around the two girls, blocking out all sound, all light, all evidence that the rest of the world existed. I don't get it," Corky stammered. "Are you some kind of ghost, an evil spirit?" Again Jennifer threw back her head in laughter. "That is a quaint way of putting it," she replied, sneering. She pointed down to the grave. "Nearly 100 years I waited down there for a new body, and then Jennifer came along." "Please," Corky cried, lowering her hands to her sides. "Stop. Let me go now, okay?" Jennifer shook her head, her eyes lighting up with pleasure. "No, please," Corky begged. "Let me go. What do you want with me?" A thin smile played over Jennifer's lips. "It's your turn to go down there," she said, pointing into the grave. Chapter 24. "No!" Corky tried to back away, but she was trapped inside the spinning dirt as thick as a garden wall. Jennifer leaned forward until her eyes burned so close to Corky that she could feel their heat. "Nearly 100 years I waited, but now I'm alive inside Jennifer, and Jennifer's enemies will pay." Again she pointed down into the grave. "Now it's your turn, Corky. But why? Corky cried. I haven't done anything to you. Haven't done anything. You and your sister, with your perfect faces, your perfect bodies, your perfect lives. But Corky turned her head, tried to get away from the searing heat of the evil, burning eyes. A bitter smile formed on Jennifer's eerily glowing face. But I showed Bobby and that boy Chip. You frightened them, Corky said, realizing what had happened, realizing that her sister's wild stories were all true. You paralyzed them, and then, you killed Bobby, Corky said, choking out the words. Jennifer nodded once and locked her eyes on Corky. Now it's your turn. No, Jennifer, wait, Corky screamed. The evil spirit inside Jennifer's body laughed scornfully. She pointed at her feet. Look down there, Corky dear. Look down at your new home. Corky, too frightened to disobey, turned her eyes down. With another wave of Jennifer's hand, more dirt flew up into the swirling dirt funnel. As the dirt rose up in eerie silence, Corky stared down into a deep hole. To her horror, the hole revealed the top of a coffin, the dark wood swollen and warped. See your new home, and your new friend, the evil spirit cried in its hoarse, dead voice. Oh! Corky moaned weakly as the coffin lid creaked open. Still compelled to peer down into the darkness, Corky watched the lid lift all the way up. Inside the coffin, she saw a rotting skeleton, its eyeless skull staring up at her with a toothy grin. The skeleton was moving, quivering all over. No! Staring hard, unable to remove her eyes from the ghastly sight, Corky saw why the skeleton appeared to quiver. Those were worms moving on the bones, thousands of white worms slithering over the skeleton, crawling over the rotting remains of Sarah Fear. Oh! Corky felt her stomach heave, felt her throat tighten in disgust. She shut her eyes and turned away, but the sight of the thousands of slithering white worms stayed with her. Swallowing hard, trying to shake away the horrifying picture, she suddenly heard voices, far away, yet familiar. For a brief, terrifying moment, she thought it was the voice of Sarah Fear calling to her from down in the open grave. But then she recognized Kimmy's voice, and heard Deborah's reply, and Ronnie's frightened shout. The voices sounded far away, because they came from outside the wall of dirt. They must have followed me, Corky realized. Your friends are too late to save you, Jennifer said calmly, without urgency. She raised both hands. No, please, Corky screamed. Please, don't! Ignoring her cries, Jennifer shoved Corky with startling strength, inhuman strength. Still screaming, Corky toppled into the hole, down to join Sarah Fear in the open, worm-ridden coffin. Chapter 25. Down into the hole, into the warped, swollen coffin, down to the white worms. But even in her screaming terror, Corky's body responded, remembering the cheerleading skills, the moves her body had practiced over the years, until they had become reflexive, a part of her. She landed hard on her feet, absorbed the pressure of the landing by bending her knees, then pushed up into a high standing jump, raised her hands, caught the top of the open grave as the wall of dirt began to swirl back down on her, pulled herself up and out as the dirt began to lower itself back into the hole. Panting loudly, she crawled away from the hole, away from the horror. Jennifer had already turned away, turned around to face the three cheerleaders. Still acting by reflex, her mind still paralyzed by the horrors of the open grave, her body forced to act on its own, Corky flung herself on Jennifer, caught her from behind, wrapped her arms around Jennifer's waist, swung her back toward the open grave. She struggled to wrestle Jennifer into the hole, into the coffin, to wrestle the evil spirit back to where it belonged, as the dirt continued to rain down, down, down. Jennifer cried out in her husky, deep voice, trying to pull out of Corky's desperate hug. The pennant, which she had clutched all the while, fell from her hand. Corky watched it drop into the hole. It landed silently among the bones and worms. They wrestled nearer to the edge of the hole. Corky pulled with all her strength, tightening her arms around Jennifer's waist, trying to throw her down. Jennifer pulled back, crying out in protest, closer to the hole, closer to the edge. I can do it, Corky thought. I can do it. But then Jennifer turned to face her, her eyes wild with fury. She opened her mouth wide, wider, and a wind blew out. A stench, a vapor, a wind that howled over Corky, covered her face, filled her nostrils. Jennifer tilted her head, closed her eyes, and the vapor roared out of her, reeking of death, of decay, of all that is foul. It blew into Corky's face, hot and wet and sour. Corky gagged and turned her face, but the wind still howled out of Jennifer's mouth, encircled Corky and choked her in its thick, hot stench. I'm going to suffocate, she thought. I can't breathe. I'm going to suffocate. The smell is too sickening. Corky realized she was weakening, about to lose the fight. One last tug. She held her breath and braced herself, summoned all of her remaining strength for one last tug. Now, she told herself, and heaved with all her might, her arms wrapped tightly around Jennifer's waist. Into the grave, Corky thought. Jennifer, go down into the grave. But Jennifer was too strong. The foul wind raged and howled from her open mouth. Jennifer didn't budge. I'm lost, Corky thought. Chapter 26. Corky felt her arms slip off Jennifer's waist. I'm lost. I'm lost. As the dirt rained down, she could suddenly hear the terrified cries of the three girls. Jennifer's eyes were open wide as the sour wind howled from her mouth. She knew she had won. She knew her evil had triumphed. First Bobby, now me, Corky thought. Bobby. Bobby. The thought of her sister filled her with renewed anger. With an anguished cry, Corky threw herself onto Jennifer's back and wrapped her hands around Jennifer's throat from behind. Jennifer struggled as Corky tightened her grip, tightened her hands, began to choke Jennifer, choked the evil spirit inside Jennifer's body, pushing her head down. The raging stream of foul vapor from Jennifer's mouth blew into the hole now, into the open grave. Corky could see it, blowing the worms around in the coffin. Yes, she cried aloud, hearing the wind lose its howl, feeling it weaken as it poured into the coffin. All the evil pouring down into the coffin. And as Corky continued to choke her, Jennifer felt lighter, light as air, and the wind stopped. Jennifer uttered a feeble groan, and the wind stopped. Yes, Corky cried, not loosening her grip on Jennifer's throat. The evil spirit is abandoning her, Corky thought. She could feel it leaving, could feel Jennifer's body growing light. Corky let go. Jennifer lay face down in the dirt. Corky watched as a coffin lid slammed shut, trapping the evil vapor, trapping the evil spirit inside. The dirt rained down in a dark, thunderous avalanche, filling the hole, recovering the grave. Buried. The evil spirit is buried again, Corky thought, gasping in the cool, sweet air, the clean air, letting the fresh night air fill her lungs. She realized she was still on her knees in the soft dirt. Corky! Kimmy was screaming. The three girls were standing right in front of her, peering at the grave in horror. They had seen it all, seen every moment of Corky's desperate battle. Now they huddled around her. Corky, are you okay? Ronnie cried. All four of them turned their eyes to Jennifer's body. Slowly, Corky rolled her over so she was face up. Oh, Kimmy groaned. Ronnie gagged and held on to Deborah to keep from sinking to her knees. As the girls gaped in silent horror, Jennifer's skin dried and crumpled, flaking off in chunks. Her long hair fell off, strands blowing away in the breeze. Her eyes sank back into her skull, then rotted into dark pits. Her cheerleader costume appeared to grow larger as her flesh decayed underneath it, and her bones appeared. Before Corky realized what was happening, she felt Kimmy's arms slide around her shoulders. It's okay, Corky, Kimmy whispered. You're okay now. It's all going to be okay. And then they heard a man's voice calling from the street. What's going on here? Darting beams from flashlights danced over the ground. The girls looked up into the suspicious faces of two uniformed Shadyside officers. What's going on here? One of the neighbors reported Both of the young officers gasped in surprise as they saw the body sprawled on the ground beside the four girls, the body draped in a cheerleader's costume. What on earth? It's Jennifer, Corky managed to say from the midst of her confusion. It's Jennifer Daly. I followed her here. She... Huh? Both police directed their lights from the body to Corky's face. You followed her here. Are you sure, miss? Yes, I followed her here. She was dancing. You didn't follow this girl, miss, the policeman said, eyeing Corky intently. This girl hasn't been dancing tonight. Take a good look at the corpse. This girl has been dead for weeks. Jennifer's anguished parents, awakened and summoned to the police station, had demanded answers. But there were no reasonable answers, no logical answers. Corky's parents had also arrived, as upset and confused as everyone else. They had waited patiently with their daughter during the hours of questioning, the police asking the same questions again and again, dissatisfied with the answers they received from Corky and the other 3 girls. Fear Street, one of the policemen had said grimly, shaking his head. Fear Street. A few minutes later, he allowed them all to go home. As Corky climbed the stairs to her room, the room she had shared with her sister, she thought of Bobby. Bobby had died because of the evil spirit's jealousy. And now Corky was alone, left alone to remember forever the horrors of this night. She turned on the light and glanced at the bedside clock. 3 o'clock in the morning. Wearily, feeling numb, she tugged off her clothes, letting them fall to the floor, and pulled a nightgown over her head. Bobby, I missed you so much, she cried out loud. Trying to force back the sobs that threatened to burst out of her throat, she turned off the light and lowered herself into bed. Bobby is gone forever, she told herself miserably. But so is the evil spirit. The evil spirit is buried once again, buried in the old grave, locked in a coffin under 6 feet of dirt where it can't harm anyone ever again. She sighed, pulling the covers up to her chin. Hey! There was something in her bed. With a startled cry, she reached down, grabbed it, held it tightly. She clicked on the lamp and stared at it, blinking as her eyes adjusted to the light. It was the maroon and white pennant with Jennifer's name stitched across the front. She stared at the pennant, reading the name again and again. Then it fell from her hand, and she started to scream. This has been a Nightfall Audiobooks production of the Cheerleaders series, Book 1, The First Evil, by R.L. Stine. Hi, this is Chris again, and thank you very much for joining me for my production of the Cheerleaders series, Book 1, The First Evil, by R.L. Stine. I gotta say, I went into this knowing nothing at all about it. All I knew is that a good chunk of it was used for the adaptation of the Fear Street series of movies on Netflix, and that's all I know. This was a pretty good book. It was a very long, slow burn, though. There wasn't a whole lot going on until about the middle of the book, when the locker doors began to slam, and Bobby was being truly haunted, and then her and Chip became paralyzed. Chip got a really bad concussion. Bobby didn't catch Kimmy, and she broke her wrist. This was a good ghost story about Fear Street. I knew something was going on when, after the bus accident, they found Jennifer with her arms wrapped around Sarah Fear's tombstone. And I was like, that's it, something is going to start happening now. But then it didn't. It went a couple of chapters. It felt like forever until finally things started to happen, and finally the hauntings began. The execution was well done. The build-up was great. The imagery was well done. This is a very, very good novel. I don't know if I would put it on top 10, but it's top 10 of the newest books that I've read that people have recommended to me to read. Would I recommend this book? Yes, absolutely. Highly recommended. This is classic Fear Street. It's done well, and I hope that the other 4 books live up to the standards that this book has laid down. If you want more books of this type of genre, where it's not psychological like Switched was, or it's not a murder like The Wrong Number, and you want something more supernatural, you should go check out The Secret Bedroom. That has possession and ghouls, and it's very, very well done. What do I do next? I don't know. Write me an email. Give me a suggestion. nightfallaudiobooks@gmail.com. I am also on YouTube at Nightfall Audiobooks. Feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Tell your friends, tell your mom, tell whoever you think would like to listen to me tell them tales from R.L. Stine. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you next time.